So with a bound, and flinging his hat higher than the trees, proceeded to hop about on one leg with a serious expression. Barker stamped wildly. "Oh, let's go home, Barker, and leave him," said Lambert. "Some of your proper and correct police will look after him. Here they come." Two grave-looking men in quiet uniforms came up the hill towards them. One held a paper in his hand. "There he is, officer," said Lambert cheerfully. "We ain't responsible for him." The officer looked at the capering Mr. Quin with a quiet eye. "We have not come, gentlemen," he said, "about what I think you are alluding to. We have come from headquarters to announce the selection of His Majesty the King. It is the rule inherited from the old regime that the news should be brought to the new sovereign immediately, wherever he is. So we have followed you across Kensington Gardens." Barker's eyes were blazing in his pale face. He was consumed with ambition throughout his life. With a certain dull magnanimity of the intellect, he had really believed in the chance method of selecting despots. But this sudden suggestion that the selection might have fallen upon him unnerved him with pleasure. "Which of us?" he began, and the respectful official interrupted him. "Not you, sir, I am sorry to say. If I may be permitted to say so, we know your services to the government, and we should be very thankful if it were. The choice has fallen—" "God bless my soul," said Lambert, jumping back 2 paces. "Not me. Don't say I'm an autocrat of all the Russias." "No, sir," said the officer, with a slight cough and a glance towards Auberon, who was at that moment putting his head between his legs and making a noise like a cow. "The gentleman whom we have to congratulate seems at the moment occupied." "Not Quin!" shrieked Barker, rushing up to him. "It can't be! Auberon, for God's sake, pull yourself together. You've been made king." With his head still upside down between his legs, Mr. Quin answered modestly, "I am not worthy. I cannot reasonably claim to equal the great men who have previously swayed the sceptre of Britain. Perhaps the only peculiarity that I can claim is that I am probably the first monarch that ever spoke out his soul to the people of England, with his head and body in this position. This may in some sense give me, to quote a poem that I wrote in my youth, a nobler office on the earth than valour, power of brain, or birth could give the warrior kings of old, the intellect clarified by this posture." Lambert and Barker made a kind of rush at him. "Don't you understand?" cried Lambert. "It's not a joke. They've really made you king. By gosh, they must have rum taste." "The great bishops of the Middle Ages," said Quin, kicking his legs in the air as he was dragged up more or less upside down, "were in the habit of refusing the honour of election 3 times and then accepting it. A mere matter of detail separates me from those great men. I will accept the post 3 times and refuse it afterwards. Oh, I will toil for you, my faithful people. You shall have a banquet of humour." By this time he had been landed the right way up, and the 2 men were still trying in vain to impress him with the gravity of the situation. "Did you not tell me, Wilfrid Lambert," he said, "that I should be of more public value if I adopted a more popular form of humour? And when should a popular form of humour be more firmly riveted upon me than now, when I have become the darling of a whole people? Officer," he continued, addressing the startled messenger, "are there no ceremonies to celebrate my entry into the city?" "Ceremonies," began the official with embarrassment, "have been more or less neglected for some little time, and—" Auberon Quin began gradually to take off his coat. "All ceremony," he said, "consists in the reversal of the obvious. Thus men, when they wish to be priests or judges, dress up like women. Kindly help me on with this coat," and he held it out. "But, your Majesty," said the officer, after a moment's bewilderment and manipulation, "you're putting it on with the tails in front." "The reversal of the obvious," said the King calmly, "is as near as we can come to ritual with our imperfect apparatus. Lead on." The rest of that afternoon and evening was to Barker and Lambert a nightmare which they could not properly realize or recall. The King, with his coat on the wrong way, went towards the streets that were awaiting him, and the old Kensington Palace, which was the royal residence. As he passed small groups of men, the groups turned into crowds, and gave forth sounds which seemed strange in welcoming an autocrat. Barker walked behind, his brain reeling, and as the crowds grew thicker and thicker, the sounds became more and more unusual, and when he had reached the great market-place opposite the church, Barker knew that he had reached it, though he was roods behind, because a cry went up such as had never before greeted any of the kings of the earth. The end of chapter 3. End of book 1.